This is Andrew Stotz of Stotz Investment Research, looking across all of Asia and the markets therein. The first thing is that I like to look at markets based upon my FVMR framework, which is fundamentals, valuation, momentum, and risk. So you see that down on the left side, and then I try to do an aggregate score of information that I can get to try to understand the relative attractiveness. Of course, this doesn't necessarily mean that market's going to outperform, but this is a good way to get an idea of how the different markets look. Now, from that, I then try to group the markets by attractive, moderate, and unattractive. So if I was allocating money to Asia right now, I would be looking at the three markets, Korea, Indonesia, and China A shares. So Korea tops the list. It's driven by a cheap valuation. If you look at the price to book, it's 1.1, meaning basically you're buying all the assets of Korean companies and you're getting all the future earnings for free. Whenever you pay about 1 times price to book, it basically means you're buying the assets in place. Now, Korea is a market, as I've written before, that never gets expensive. So that may range up to maybe 1.5 as a maximum, unlike a market like Indonesia or a market like the Philippines or India that trade at 2 or 3 times price to book. But the point is that Korea is starting to look reasonably cheap. And momentum is pretty good, and it's got a relatively low level of volatility. Now, Indonesia has the highest ROE in Asia, and it's moderately strong, has moderately strong price momentum. Of course, that ROE is also driven by a high inflation rate, as Indonesia has experienced for many years. But on the face of it, to me, across all measures, Indonesia is another market that's worth looking at. And what we can also see is that Hong Kong looks least attractive. Return on equity very low at 7.3. In fact, that's the lowest in all of Asia. But you have to pay 17 times a PE for that. And a price to book of about 1.3 is actually basically is even a little bit expensive if it's a 7.3% ROE for a while. So that gives you an overview of the markets in Asia and how I'm looking at them right now. And of course, as the date shows, this is the 29th of May, 2017. Have a great day, and if you've got a question, just leave it in the comments below.